They weren't just tools of transport, they were lifelines across the world's most unforgiving terrain. From the iconic Sherman tanks to the workhorse trucks, these are the vehicles of the Korean War. First up, light tanks. M24 Chaffee, the first American armor to face North Korean tanks in 1950. Badly outmatched by the T-34, but it bought crucial time for retreating UN forces. M3 Stuart, already obsolete before the war even began, it found its place in reconnaissance, where speed and a lightweight design mattered more than its vulnerability to nearly everything the North Koreans deployed. M5A1 Stuart, used for screening and liaison duties, while heavier tanks took on the real fighting. Its single radio engine gave it the mobility to remain useful in a secondary role. Moving on to medium tanks, M4A3E8 Sherman, the Easy 8. Its high-velocity 76mm gun finally gave UN crews a fighting chance against North Korean T-34s after the disastrous opening weeks. M4A3 105mm Sherman, equipped with a howitzer, it became the preferred choice for direct fire against fortified hilltop positions that defined the war's grinding static phase. M26 Pershing rushed into Korea in 1950 to counter the T-34. Its 90mm gun could defeat any North Korean armor, ending the brief period of enemy tank dominance. Next, M46 Patton. Mechanical improvements over the Pershing made it the preferred UN medium tank for most of the war, particularly suited to Korea's steep mountainous terrain. Then A27M Cromwell, used by British forces mainly for artillery observation and liaison, its frontline combat role largely replaced by more modern designs. T-34-76, the earlier variant fielded by North Korea during the initial invasion. Sloped armor and wide tracks gave it a clear edge over the light American tanks it first encountered. T-34-85, the tank that nearly drove UN forces into the sea in 1950. Its 85mm gun outclassed everything the Americans initially fielded, forcing a desperate response from Washington. Next, heavy tanks. Centurion Mark III. British crews proved it was one of the finest tanks of the war, its 84mm gun and reliable systems performing superbly in both mobile and static fighting. Churchill Mark VII, heavily armored and built for infantry support. Its thick plating survived hits that would have destroyed lighter vehicles outright. Churchill Crocodile, the flamethrower variant, decisive in clearing bunkers and tunnels that conventional weapons struggled to neutralize. IS-2, supplied by the Soviets to North Korea. Its 122mm gun gave communist forces a heavy breakthrough capability that UN planners had to account for throughout the war. Next, tank destroyers and assault guns. M10 Wolverine, a veteran of World War II. Its speed allowed it to strike and withdraw before heavier enemy armor could respond. M36 Jackson, armed with a 90mm gun, it became the most capable American tank destroyer in Korea, one of the few early UN weapons able to reliably penetrate the T-34 at range. Su-76M, used by North Korean forces throughout the invasion, its mobility allowing it to support infantry advances across difficult terrain. Su-100, another Soviet-supplied threat. Its 100mm gun could defeat any UN armor in Korea and was taken seriously by every UN tank commander. Moving on to self-propelled artillery, M7 Priest. Its mobile 105mm howitzer delivered the responsive fire support UN infantry desperately needed during the war's fluid early battles. M37 105mm howitzer, introduced during the conflict, offering improved crew protection while maintaining the anti-aircraft capability ground commanders relied on. M40 155mm gun. Its long-range firepower allowed UN forces to strike deep behind enemy lines. M41 155mm howitzer, built for shoot-and-move tactics, essential in a war where Chinese counter-battery fire was a constant threat. M43 8-inch howitzer, used against heavily fortified positions, firing some of the largest shells in the UN arsenal. M44 self-propelled howitzer, introduced toward the end of the war, bringing improved mobility and better crew protection to 105mm missions. Sexton, relied on by Canadian and British Commonwealth forces for consistent responsive fire support with its 25-pounder gun. ISU-122, supplied to North Korean forces, giving them a powerful 122mm assault capability. ISU-152, Soviet-supplied, its massive 152mm howitzer, devastating against fortifications and among the heaviest weapons fielded in the war.
Next, self-propelled anti-aircraft. M15 combination gun motor carriage, a 37mm cannon paired with twin heavy machine guns protecting ground units from low-level air attacks. M16 multiple gun motor carriage, 4 50-caliber machine guns delivering devastating firepower especially against massed infantry. M19 gun motor carriage, twin 40mm guns effective against both aircraft and dense infantry formations. M42 Duster, introduced late in the war, its twin 40mm guns proving highly effective against both air and ground targets. Moving on to armored personnel carriers and half-tracks. M2 half-track, used for reconnaissance and artillery towing, its shorter frame well suited to narrow mountain roads. M3 half-track, the primary armored infantry carrier for UN forces moving troops across Korea's difficult terrain. M5 half-track, supplied to allied nations, its welded armor offering improved protection. M9 half-track, used mainly for transport and supply, with parts commonality easing maintenance in the field. Universal carrier, employed by British and Commonwealth forces to transport weapons teams and supplies. Oxford carrier, M39 armored utility vehicle, served Commonwealth forces with improved capacity for sustained operations. M39 armored utility vehicle, its running gear allowed it to move supplies even under fire. M75 armored personnel carrier, one of the first purpose-built tracked APCs, marking a shift toward modern armored infantry doctrine. BTR-40, Soviet-supplied, providing mobile protection for infantry units. BTR-152, a six-wheeled armored carrier used throughout the early Cold War period. Continuing with armored cars, M8 Greyhound, used for reconnaissance, its speed allowing rapid probing and withdrawal. M20 armored utility car, served as command and liaison vehicle. Daimler Dingo, a compact scout car used by British Commonwealth forces. BA-64, Soviet-supplied, used for reconnaissance and liaison duties. Moving on to amphibious vehicles. LVT-3 Bushmaster, carried Marines ashore during the Incheon landing, a turning point in the war. LVT-4, its rear ramp allowed troops to disembark under fire more effectively. LVT-A-4, armed with a 75mm howitzer, providing fire support but not used to transport infantry. DUKW, essential for moving supplies from ship to shore, especially where port facilities were unavailable. M76 Otter, capable of traversing rice paddies and river obstacles, supporting logistics operations. Ford GPA, an amphibious jeep, used for river crossings when bridges were unavailable. Now, tactical and utility vehicles. Willys MB, the ubiquitous vehicle of UN forces transporting personnel and supplies across harsh terrain. Ford GPW, functionally identical to the Willys, simplifying maintenance and logistics. Dodge M37 replaced the WC series, serving in multiple roles. Land Rover Series 1, used by British forces, valued for reliability and off-road capability. Oxford K2Y, an ambulance, used to evacuate casualties under difficult conditions. Gaz-67, Soviet-supplied, serving as the communist counterpart to the Jeep. Gaz-69, an improved Soviet utility vehicle used in the later stages of the war. Next, motorcycles. Harley-Davidson WLA, used by military police and dispatch riders. Norton 16H, relied on for communication and liaison duties.
BSA M20, a dependable motorcycle for courier and patrol roles. M72, Soviet-supplied, used for reconnaissance and liaison, often equipped with a sidecar. Finally, transport and cargo trucks. GMC CCKW 2.5-ton 6x6, the logistical backbone of UN operations, moving supplies across the peninsula. M34 2.5-ton 6x6, an early post-war design that began replacing wartime trucks. M35 2.5-ton 6x6, continuing the evolution of military logistics vehicles. Its multi-fuel engine and rugged construction made it ideal for Korean conditions, where fuel quality varied enormously and roads ranged from paved highways to little more than mountain goat tracks. M135 2.5-ton 6x6, its automatic transmission reduced driver fatigue during the long supply runs that sustained UN forces across the peninsula's demanding road network in all seasons. Studebaker US-6 2.5-ton 6x6, originally produced for World War II Lend-Lease, surviving examples continued supply duties with various UN forces throughout Korea. Chevrolet G506 1.5-ton 4x4, used for lighter cargo and communications duties, its smaller size allowing it to reach forward positions that larger trucks could not safely navigate. Diamond T968 4-ton 6x6, heavy artillery units depended on this powerful truck to move field guns and ammunition across the terrain that defined much of the fighting. M24 5-ton 6x6, its heavy payload capacity made it essential for transporting bulk ammunition, engineering supplies, and equipment that sustained operations well beyond the war itself. Bedford QL, relied upon by British Commonwealth forces for supply transport over roads that ranged from barely serviceable to effectively impassable. Bedford OXD, lighter Commonwealth supply runs fell to this 1.5-ton truck, handling forward area logistics where larger vehicles became easy targets. Morris C8, British artillery units used this field gun tractor to keep their 25-pounders mobile. Its four-wheel drive handled terrain most trucks avoided entirely. AEC Matador, used to tow medium field guns, its pulling power keeping artillery mobile across Korea's steep mountain roads. Scammell Pioneer, British recovery units depended on this heavy vehicle to retrieve tanks and artillery from terrain where combat and weather regularly left them stranded. Leyland Hippo handled rear area logistics, moving bulk supplies that sustained fighting units through both mobile and static phases. Next up, Toyota KB, operated by South Korean forces for supply and liaison duties, its familiarity to local drivers an advantage in a rapidly expanding army. GAZAA, used by North Korean supply columns throughout the war, its simple construction allowing field repairs even after UN air attacks disrupted transport routes. GAZMM, an improved version of the standard Soviet cargo truck, hauling ammunition and supplies under constant threat of air attack. ZIS-151, Soviet supplied to North Korean and Chinese forces, its six-wheel drive proving effective in the mud and snow that defined Korean winters and slowed all logistics. Finally, tracked utility, engineering, and support vehicles. M29 Weasel, used by UN forces to supply positions across rice paddies and muddy terrain that wheeled vehicles simply could not cross. M31 tank recovery vehicle, carried over from World War II, used to retrieve tanks disabled by enemy fire or terrain, keeping armored units operational. M32 tank recovery vehicle, its distinctive A-frame crane allowed recovery crews to perform battlefield repairs, returning tanks to action instead of waiting days for depot maintenance. M74 tank recovery vehicle, introduced during the war to handle heavier tanks, providing recovery capability earlier systems could not always manage. Centurion ARV, used by British units to recover Centurion tanks from difficult terrain, maintaining the operational strength that made them so effective. Churchill ARV, built on a heavy tank chassis, used to extract vehicles too deeply mired or damaged for lighter recovery vehicles. Cromwell ARV, a faster recovery variant, used to retrieve disabled vehicles quickly during mobile operations. M25 tank transporter, the Dragon Wagon, used to move tanks long distances across Korea's road network, preserving their tracks and mechanical systems for combat. M4A3 Sherman bulldozer, used by UN engineers to clear roads blocked by landslides and debris, often under fire in forward areas. Caterpillar D7 armored bulldozer, employed to build and maintain roads constantly threatened by Korea's harsh terrain, frequently operating under front-line conditions. Caterpillar D8 armored bulldozer, the heaviest bulldozer in UN service, used for major engineering tasks including airfield construction that sustained air operations. M4 high-speed tractor, kept medium field guns mobile during fluid phases of the war, from advances to rapid withdrawals. M5 high-speed tractor, used by heavier artillery units, where rapid displacement after firing was essential against Chinese counter-battery fire. M6 high-speed tractor, required to move the largest 8-inch howitzers in UN service, delivering the heaviest ground fire available. M8 high-speed tractor, kept the heaviest guns moving. Its tank-derived running gear handling terrain wheeled vehicles could not. Next up, T-34T armored recovery vehicle, used by North Korean and Chinese forces to retrieve damaged armor under fire, maintaining tank strength in combat. Ya-12 artillery tractor. North Korean units relied on this Soviet tractor to keep heavy guns mobile during the offensives that pushed UN forces back to the Pusan Perimeter. Stalinets S-65, converted from agricultural use, hauling heavy artillery across terrain that challenged every vehicle during the early months of the war. Stalinets S-80, an improved version, used to move artillery through Korea's harsh winters, conditions that pushed both machines and crews to their limits.